Welcome to Silver Lining for Learning, episode 165. I'm Punya Mishra from Arizona State University. With me are my co-hosts Chris Dede from Harvard and Kurt Bong from Indiana. Our fourth partner in crime, Young Zhao from the University of Kansas, University of Melbourne, cannot join us today. He was the person who actually organized this episode, but had to go back to China on short notice and sends his regrets. We are actually quite excited about today's show for a number of reasons. First, because I think we are exploring an important topic, that of time and what that means for learning. Second, we are speaking with innovators and people on the ground, which is always great. We tend to speak to a lot of academics, and there's nothing wrong with academics. I'm one myself, and we are decent people. But it's always great to speak to people who are on the ground, who are making these things happen. As you can see, one of our guest is actually on Saturday in the classroom, working on a weekend. But finally, some of our best episodes over the past 3 years have included student voices, and we have one with us today, which is really exciting. So here we go. Today's episode is about time, maybe the most important non-renewable sort of finite resource that we have. We often hear of time on task as being critical to success. And of course, that begs the question about how that time is being used. And over the past few years, a group of schools in the US have implemented a 4-day school week. And it has grown significantly over the past decades, from mere hundreds to over 1,600 in 20 states across the country. Some of these models add hours to the regular day in order to meet state requirements for number of hours that students need to be there. Others haven't done that. And today we're going to hear from one school district in Texas that has been engaged in this experiment. So with us today are John Kuhn, who is superintendent of Mineral Wells School District in Texas. And John, I have to say, after Zhao mentioned that you would be on the show, I looked you up and have been so impressed with what a strong advocate you have been for public education. So thank you both for your service and for that public voice. Also with us is Bethany Carter, who is a pre-K teacher in Mineral Wells as well. She has been teaching for 6 years and currently teaches pre-K at Lamar Elementary. And finally, last but not the least, is Janelle, a junior in high school. She's involved in the National Honor Society and Student Council and a variety of other things. So thank you all for joining us today. So let me start with you, John. Tell us a little bit about your district and what sort of prompted this change.
Mineral Wells ISD is a rural school district. We have about 3,350 students. We're 60 miles west of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex area. Traditional 5-day school week forever up until last year. So we're in our second year now as a 4-day school. Going back, I never would have imagined that I would be superintendent of a 4-day school week school district. It wasn't something I ever really had intentions of doing, and started hearing about it, several years ago, primarily in very small, very rural school districts around North Texas. And in my mind, as I started hearing about it, obviously you hear from teachers and other people who come and want to talk to you about, is there any chance we would ever do that? And my answer was always, no, there's zero chance we would ever do that in Mineral Wells. I thought of it as a gimmick. I thought of it as something that if you were a school district with 100 students, K through 12, or 150 or 200 students, that you could have a 4-day school week because that's a small enough population to where you could talk to all of your parents and community members and get everyone kind of on board with the idea. And those are the schools where I saw it first, take place. So what changed for me was a pretty pragmatic situation. We had a school district in our county that went with a 4-day week, very small school district, and, took notice of that, but it didn't really make a huge difference to me. I just thought it was interesting. It was a really, really small school. And then the following year, 2 additional school districts, one in my county and one north of us just across the county line, but both of them within 20 miles of us. They went to the 4-day week. Again, I took notice, wow, this is gaining in popularity. But what really got my attention was we had one of our very best teachers who had been with my school district since she graduated college, and she was a veteran teacher. She jumped ship on us and went to one of the 4-day schools nearby. And I thought, oh boy, that's we may start losing quality teachers to this other school. And we were already in a position where it was getting harder and harder to hire people because of our location, close proximity to the Fort Worth area. There are schools just to our east that are able to pay significantly higher wages than we do. So hiring teachers is a challenge, and it's a very competitive situation. So I immediately kind of started seeing the 4-day week as a competitive advantage for those schools in terms of recruiting and retaining quality teaching staff. And so the next shoe that dropped was after we lost this one teacher, I happened to see her principal at a meeting we were both at. And I said, hey, you got one of my best teachers, congratulations, you've hired a really good person there. And she said, well, we've got 3 more coming from your school district as well. So we lost 4 teachers between these schools around us that are on the 4-day week within a very short period of time. And so I just brought it up to the board as a discussion item. Is this something we need to talk about? And they said, yes, we'd like to talk about it. So the process was really straightforward. The very next school board meeting, I did just an informational presentation about, how many schools in Texas are on the 4-day week, what are their, student performance results before and after, and, what are the pros and the cons. And they basically at the end of that meeting gave me homework to go and do a deeper dive into the academic research and also the student performance data of as many Texas 4-day week schools as I could, and come back because they were very concerned, as a lot of people are when you talk about the 4-day week, with what will the impacts on student performance be. You're losing a day of instruction. Ultimately, what we found out in talking to other school districts is you're not losing as much time as you think you are, because you can extend the school day a little bit to offset some of the lost minutes of instruction, but also there's the idea of quality of instructional minutes, not just quantity. And so when you start taking into account the fact that people can use that day off, in our case it's a Friday, some schools take Monday off. When you start looking at the fact that that Friday can be the day when teachers are taking their children to the doctor, or when students are scheduling, absences to go to the orthodontist and things like that, you have more time with the teacher and the student in the room together, versus even on that 5-day week. I'm not saying you have more time, but I'm saying that offsets some of the lost time from the change in the schedule. So I hope that wasn't too meandering of an answer, and I hope
No,
I hit
that
the
was
points
great. No, that was great, John. I think gave us a sense of how this came to be. So clearly it was at some level driven a lot by pressures from other districts where you were losing teachers to and so on. So Bethany, how long have you been at the district, and how has this change worked for you? And I'm particularly interested because you're teaching in the pre-K space, where I think particularly for parents who are working 5 days a week, how has that played out? I'm just curious to understand that and your experience in teaching in that context.
I've been with Mineral Wells for 6 years, so since I started. And overall, I think parents have really embraced it. They've loved that extra day to spend with their kids. And if it's not the parents, the grandparents have a chance to spend time with the student. But our students are more, I think, recharged on Monday rather than kind of still feeling the weekend and not ready. But we have had a great experience. I know personally, I commute an hour. Oh, sorry, my light went off. Sorry, if we don't move, the lights go off. But I commute an hour, and the one less day to drive, so one less day for gas and wear and tear on the car, that's really helped me. And I know there's a lot of other teachers in our district that commute as well. That's been really beneficial. I know.
Okay. Yeah. We'll hear from Janelle and then we'll circle back. I know Kurt has some questions. So Janelle, how has it been as a student with the 4-day week?
Well, I definitely am not less busy. So I definitely have more opportunities to do things. So one of the things I like to do on Friday is volunteer at the senior center. I have like a crochet class that I go and I crochet and get to know some of the like community members and stuff. But the senior center is only open on weekdays. So if I didn't have that Friday off, I wouldn't be able to do that. So usually what my Fridays look like is some Fridays I have rehearsal for theater. We have a Shrek the Musical coming up. So we usually have a long rehearsal there. And then there's usually football games, getting ready for that. So I think it's definitely helping like the student body just prepare for those games with practices, and just getting ready so we have a good game. So our Rams are winning pretty well. We didn't win last night, but we're doing okay.
Good, thank you. So one of the things I was curious about, did you extend the school day, or is it the same as it was before, John?
We extended it a minimal amount, and it's not the same at every level. So at elementary, we extended it by about 15 or 20 minutes. At the high school level, I think it extended by about 30 minutes.
Okay.
But that was, we were, I think, thoughtful in our design, because we listened and we heard some of the concerns that the community had. And one of those really clear concerns was, we don't want our students to stay at school until 5 p.m. and be exhausted to free up the hours to offset this Friday off. So we didn't do that. Our state has a number of minutes that you have to go in order to get full funding. It's 75,600 or 76,500. I never can remember where the 6 and the 5 go. But we made sure that we were above that number so that if we lose a day due to bad weather or something like that, that we're okay. But we didn't extend the day excessively, but we did extend it a little bit.
And before Kurt, I bring you on. So Janelle, thank you for sharing what you did, because one thing that really stood out for me, because one of the very important things I think that schools do, public schools in particular, it's not just sort of content instruction, right? It is also the drama, the sports, and so on, which are such an important part of what it means to grow up and what it means to be part of a community and a school. And so one of the things I heard you say is that those components, you have been given more space to fit those components in your life in a sort of a more integrated way, rather than it be tacked on to the end of the day or super early in the morning, which is what my kids used to go through when they were in school. So thank you for sharing that. So Kurt, I'm going to pass it on to you, and then Chris, and we will popcorn it from there.
John, I heard you never have bad weather days in Texas. There's no storms ever get down there, do they?
No, absolutely.
So I appreciate what you all had to say there. And I point out that I teach a course that involves creativity. And as part of that course, we talk about things like idea squelching statements that happen. And I'm kind of curious, from all three of your perspectives, what kind of idea squelching statements have you heard? And then what kinds of things have you said in response to those statements? Because we've had people, change is slow oftentimes. And the creative process oftentimes has a lot of barriers to it from idea squelching people. So it's recognition of that, recognition of the no people out there. I know at Wisconsin, when I left graduate school, the last department chair we had, they called him Dr. No, because he'd say no to everything. It's recognition that you're going to get a no answer. You feel a little, you don't feel as bad when you know it's coming. So we have people listening. We have people who are going to be watching this who might want to be creating 4-day or 3-day or 4.5 day or whatever changes in their school schedules or structures. And they're going to face a lot of contention, a lot of people who are the no people out there, the idea squelchers that come. So what kinds of things did you hear? And what kinds of things served you well in the responses to those idea squelchers? Any of you?
I'll let the ladies go first, and I'll finish up, because I can talk about this for a long time. That was really the main thing I did, is kind of field those type of.
Yeah, I figured as much. And they can come from parents, or they can come from friends, local community, leaders or educators. Any of those, Bethany or Janelle?
I think what I've heard at the beginning the most is, what are they going to do on Friday with their student? That was a big thing when they started talking about it. And we offer an opportunity for them to sign up last year to go to school if they didn't have anywhere else to go. And that really wasn't utilized a lot. they found a way to make it work and to embrace the changes of it.
So they had a place to go and study on a Friday.
For the lower grades.
Yeah, oh, for the lower grades, okay.
Yeah, so I haven't really heard anybody in the student body upset about not going to school. So a lot of us use that time. So the group I'm in is kind of academically competitive. So we definitely use that time to study and to get our work under control. So I'm taking a lot of dual credit classes. So I still have work that's due on Fridays. So just being able to focus on that has really been helpful in managing all my college work and my extracurricular activities. So I haven't really heard any complaints.
That makes a lot of
Well,
sense.
I have. I've heard quite a few. So when, it was a new concept for our community, and we did a lot of research and a lot of outreach to other school districts that had already implemented it. One of the unique things about us is we're a larger school district compared to the small rural schools that had traditionally adopted this model. So there were a lot of concerns. Bethany was exactly right. The biggest and most frequent, I guess, squelching statement was, "Oh my gosh, what about these people that can't afford another day of daycare? What are they going to do with their kids on Fridays?" And we already had a good idea from talking to another school district, Athens ISD here in Texas, that they told us that that would be the concern that everybody raised, and that after it was implemented, it would turn out to be kind of a nothing burger. And so I initially, when I presented this to the board, I told them that you're going to hear this concern, and it sounds like a legitimate concern, but it doesn't really materialize in the end. So I actually advocated that we not offer anything on Fridays, that it just be a student staff holiday, because that's the purpose of what we're doing, is to try and attract teachers and keep our teachers. And so we wanted this to be a really special thing, for them. So I had a board member who absolutely was not going to support this unless we did something for those families that needed something for their kids. And so we did. We put together what we called optional Friday remediation. We limited it up to grade 4 for the smallest kids. And that first year, we had 53 students sign up for it. What Athens told us was, you'll start with a certain number, you'll end with way fewer, because those kids don't want to go. They want a day off like all their friends have. And what we found out is that was true. By the end of that first year, we had 20 something kids who were coming every Friday. So we started this year out. We continue to offer it. But we started in the 20s this year, and we are under the impression that by the end of this year, we'll probably be in the teens or single digits even of kids utilizing this, what we're offering on Fridays. It's a remediation day. We have certified teachers, we have a principal, we have a school nurse, all on staff. It does cost us some money. Other squelching statements, because there were several of them, and some of them were really, really lame and like paper thin logically, but you still have to respectfully engage with those things. And so we had, for example, we had one local person who was very, very much opposed to this idea, even though their children didn't go to our school district. And that person sent a letter. It was a letter with 10 bullet points of all the reasons why this was a horrible idea. And some of the points were just very speculative. Like, one of the points was, our city's trying to grow and develop, and this, there are going to be people who look at this schedule and choose not to come live here. And my response to that was, or there will be people who choose to come and live here because they want that day with their kids. Other issues that people brought up, going back to the issue of daycare, the way we addressed that was we took that concern away, offering the optional Friday remediation. Those are the two biggest ones I can think of, but there were a number of them, and I just remember being struck by. So the other big one is the impact on student performance. There was a lot of just assumption that having this Friday off was going to tank our student performance, and we knew that wasn't always the case. There's a academic journal, I think it's called the Rural Educator, and one of the main pieces of research that I relied on in contending with that squelching statement was a paper from 2011, the Rural Educator, and I think it was a meta-analysis, and what they found was there's no evidence that a 4-day week will harm or help student performance. that there's too many other variables that determine how well students do, quality of instruction, the culture of the school, and all those things. And so the way I contended with that, I had people say, the kids' scores are going to go down if they go to a 5-day week. And my response to that with some people was, well, do you want us to go to a 6-day week? Because by that logic, a 6 or 7-day week would be even better. Another thing I did was I pointed out the fact that when I went to college, I never had a 5-day week. And so if Harvard University doesn't require a 5-day week, as far as I know, Harvard provides a pretty good education. I never went there, but everything I've heard, right? And so why aren't they providing? Why aren't they requiring students to be on a 5-day week? So, but it was hard to contend with this idea that the way we've always done it is the only way you can do it. It got easier after we adopted the 4-day week, because since then, dozens and dozens of Texas schools have also adopted the 4-day week. I'll say one other thing, and I don't mean to be wordy. There are states where the squelching statement has actually been squelching legislation. Oklahoma, one of those, and that we saw that in Texas this last legislative session. It ended up not really going anywhere, but I believe in Oklahoma, they changed the number of minutes that schools are required to go to basically make it impossible to have a 4-day week. And I had some conversations with colleagues from Oklahoma about this, and they were trying to contend with, political commentary about it, which is not always, fact-based or fair-minded.
Thanks for that, John. And now we're going to hear from a professor at Harvard who can talk about whether or not students go for 5 days or not, and whether he would like that to happen. Chris, you have a question?
Well, I'm not going to address 5 days in Harvard, but I will say I'm going to push back on this because this has been really remarkably one-sided as a discussion. And I'm not trying to say that what you're doing in your district is a bad thing, because I don't know the details and the communities, but I am going to say that the idea that somehow universally education would be better if it had a 4-day week there's a lot of reasons to be skeptical about that. One of them is that one of the most robust findings in educational research is time on task, that the more time you have on task, the better off things tend to be. And the fact that there isn't definitive research that the 4-day week harms or helps people because it's been impossible to do that research, because there isn't any way to factor out all the other things that could be happening, doesn't mean that it doesn't have an effect. It means that nobody's figured out a way to measure it reliably. So that's one thing, is that it's going to take better evidence to establish whether or not this has a deleterious effect on kids. And even if that research shows that on average it doesn't, typically the kids who are most affected are the kids who were marginalized in their lives. And so I would be very curious about research that shows for the 20% of students that are marginalized, or 30%, whatever it happens to be in a particular district, how does it affect them? Because ultimately schools are responsible not just for on average, but they're responsible for trying to close achievement gaps of different kinds. So that's one argument. Another argument is that, well, what if the 5th day were remote? I mean, if the issue is commuter time and gasoline and so on, parents wanting more time with their kids, what if the 5th day were remote? This program is all about the fact that remote instruction is not necessarily inferior instruction. Unprepared remote instruction is inferior, as is unprepared face-to-face instruction, I might add. So the idea that it's kind of all or nothing, it's 4 days or 5 days, but every day is the same, that also seems to me to be understating the variations that could happen that would be important. I looked at newspaper articles about this. There are concerns that are raised, maybe not in North Texas, but across the country, There's a lot of urban areas in which you do have single parents who really would be in trouble if they didn't have schools for childcare, and who also would be in trouble if their kids weren't getting free meals at a school 5 days a week. So it's not a universal thing to say, well, it works here, and so it's going to work other places as well. And I would just ask this, if I went to businesses anywhere in the country and I said, why don't you just give everybody a day off during the week? Don't extend the hours that they're working, and it's not going to have any effect. You can just have people spend 4 hours of work and stop, 4 days of work and stop. I don't think many businesses would buy into that. I don't think you'd find a whole lot of businesses that could say, oh yeah, that makes sense. It's kind of a hassle for people to come. We'll just give them another day of vacation. That's not going to cut it in any other sector of the economy. And so why would it magically somehow work in education? Again, I'm not saying that your particular community might not be okay, although it's hard to tell at this point. But I certainly would be worried if there was a massive movement to go to the 4-day school week across the country. And I would be particularly worried about marginalized students. And I'm curious as to what my co-hosts think about that argument.
So I can just add one comment here that actually in work, now we are looking at 4-day weeks in a variety of contexts. There was a big study done in Britain, I think, around 4-day work. And what it showed is that organized, like people were more satisfied. The work didn't seem to be that affected. So I think there are movements, I think post-pandemic, questioning this idea that we need to be locked into these times and so on. So I think there is a case to be made for it. I mean, again, I understand that it is contextual. I get that. But I would love to hear from our guest about, particularly, I think the point, Chris, that you raised about the ones who are marginalized, who need the most support, that I'm just curious to hear from particularly Bethany and John about that, because you are working with a variety of students. So Janelle, I mean, you are clearly one of the students who is, engaged and active and involved. But what about your friends who may or may not be, for whom school may not be that, what I don't know what the right phrase, but I hope you get what I'm trying to say. So I'd love to hear your takes on it. Maybe start with Bethany. What are your thoughts on this?
Let me just add a little commentary before they all jump in. I think Chris's second point is something that I wanted to raise as well, about the high flex nature of learning today. There's a huge movement towards a high flex instruction post-pandemic. People experienced online learning, some successes, some with huge successes, some with huge failures, but they were experimenting with schedules, and some found this happy medium with a high flex model of a blended approach. And I was thinking, what would be possible, for students to be at home that 5th day, and for you to have minimal amount of instructors who would be able to provide some, mentoring, support, tutoring, whatever, a scaffolded instruction on the side that isn't that costly, but keeps the instruction, and the focus and the task, the time on task commitment. And I think Janelle would have the most, experience maybe with such approaches. I don't know if you have. I also mentioned that the corporations the studies I've read, going to 4-day work weeks, they've switched to 10-hour work days. Some have used the Google flex time, where 20% time, where employees get 20% of the work week to work on products that they want to work on. That's resulted in things like Gmail and other Google products, with the people, deciding what they're going to work on, self-directing their work day. So there's been experimentations in the workforce And there's more coming, undoubtedly. But I'm particularly interested in number 2. But number 1's very, very important as well. And I'm sure John has a lot to say, and he's kind of addressed it indirectly. But Janelle?
So I'm kind of choosy on like who I hang around, because of like, I definitely get that you become like the company you keep, and I definitely strive to be well-rounded and you know, achieve things academically. So I don't think I'm the best to talk about the marginalized students and the people who like my group of friends and the people I interact with, that I would know their perspective on this don't really oppose the 4-day week, and it doesn't affect them in a way that is negative. So did that answer your question? Or
Yeah, I'd
Thanks.
love to hear from Bethany, how you are seeing students in your class, because you've been doing this for 6 years, and I'm sure you see a wide range of students. You have the Janelles in your class and you have the others. Do you see any difference because of the 4-day week? And John, then we'll come to you because you have the sort of the big picture, but I'd love to get sort of the immediate classroom context of that.
Yeah, I haven't seen a big difference, but we also have an accelerated instruction day where it's invite only for those kids who need that extra help. So you can work smaller groups with those kids. I think that's really beneficial because sometimes there's some kids that just need that small group and extra help. And it's a lot of the marginalized students. That's been, I think, really beneficial for them. We have one of those days coming up next week. But then it's also the students who don't need it. They may not receive an invitation. And it's the ones you can focus on, the students who really need that extra help.
Thanks,
Thanks,
you.
Bethany. This is such an interesting question and such an interesting topic. I think it's a tug of war between rigid thinkers and flexible thinkers. It's not really a tug of war between those who think that marginalized students don't need time on task and those who do. And also, I want to say clearly for the record, we adopted this for our community. Nobody on this call is asserting that this is right for every community. It certainly isn't right for every community, and it's something you have to weigh out. But we do have marginalized students in our school district, and then we have students who come from very privileged backgrounds in our school district as well. But we are mostly marginalized. We're 75 to 80% free and reduced lunch in my school district. And so we offer several things for those students who are marginalized. We made the optional Friday remediation available for every kid, grades pre-K through 4. And like I said, we have about 20 kids taking advantage of that. So it's not that it's not available. The issue is, that if students and their parents don't feel like that's what they want, we're not forcing them to come on that Friday. We do offer the accelerated instruction days that Bethany just mentioned. I think we have 6 of those days built into the schedule. We use a Friday for that. And that is required attendance for those kids who have shown that they're struggling in the classroom. We bring them up and give them additional help. We also used 4 of those Fridays off for professional development for our staff to train them up. So these aren't just, strictly holidays. This is a flexible use. I'll also say that I have a daughter. She's a junior in high school as well. She spends much of her Fridays doing schoolwork. So the notion that was brought up about could we have this be a remote day? Absolutely. There's a million different ways you can design a 4-day week or a hybrid 4-day week with a day of remote instruction. It's whatever the school district, and their community feels like works for their needs. In our case, the main priority was putting quality teachers in front of our kids, marginalized and non-marginalized alike. And we felt that was where our success was going to be built, was getting and keeping the very best teachers we could in an extremely competitive environment. And so we do have teachers, Janelle mentioned earlier, going up on Fridays and working with the theater group. We have teachers that are working every single Friday, including offering tutoring on a case-by-case basis as they see fit and as their students are asking for. The difference is we're not forcing everyone to sit in a building all day long on Fridays, but it doesn't mean no academic activity is going that day. And in reality, if you think about a 5-day week for students, it's much longer than a 5-day week because they have homework that they work on all weekend long. What we've done is ease a little bit of that pressure and create opportunities for kids to do things with their families. With our kids, a lot of our kids work, and a lot of our kids work to pay for their insurance on their car or to pay for their car. A lot of our kids work to help provide for their family. We have students who live in motels. We have students who are homeless. And so for a lot of those marginalized kids, the opportunity to make more money and work on weekends has been beneficial to them. So I just think this is a lot more complicated and nuanced than, hey, 4 days are good, so 5 days must be great, because I think a lot of our kids, they're getting very similar amount of time on task on this more flexible scheduling than they were on the old scheduling. And I think a lot of that time it's arguable, and the professor is exactly right. There's not enough research to definitively say whether this is better, but there's also not definitive research to say that it's necessarily worse. There have been research articles that I've seen that say there's a minimal negative impact on academics. But I think definitely there's more research to be done. But at the same time, I'm not sitting here today arguing that this is the better way to do education. What I'm saying is, instead of having substitute teachers in class, if a 4-day week can help us get fully educated, fully certified teachers in front of our kids, teachers that are choosing to come to our high poverty school district versus the bedroom communities to our east, that's not necessarily a bad thing, even though the time on task may be, negligibly less.
Thank you, John. I think one of the pieces that seems to be emerging from this, and Janelle, I saw you smiling when John was talking about sort of friends of yours who are working and so on, that in some ways there is nothing sacrosanct about 5 days or 7 days. I mean, we at some point in human evolution decided 7 was a unit of days that we would set aside. I mean, even at least the month comes from the cycles of the moon. 7, it just sort of happened. And we have sort of globally taken that on. But I think that the point you're making, which I think Zhao, and I'm going to channel Zhao a little bit on this because I know Zhao would have brought up this issue, which is that the broader sort of context and purpose of learning and school being just one component of that. So I don't know, Janelle, if you had a comment to make, because I saw you smiling when John was talking about sort of students who are working or other kinds of contexts.
Yeah, so getting a job was definitely a part of high school, and balancing like extracurriculars, a work life, a social life, homework, that's definitely been a learning experience. So when you wake up early in the morning and then go to school all day and then have to work after school and then do homework, that's definitely a task to so.
No, I hear it. So this is a bunch of years ago when my daughter was, I had just started at ASU, and my daughter was then a senior in high school. And we were doing this sort of school redesign with a school here in Scottsdale. And I actually had her and one of her high school teachers make a short video about just describing their day. Because a lot of people don't realize, and I have to dig that video out because she was just talking to the camera about what time she wakes up in the morning, then how she has to get, do X, Y, and Z school, and then there's soccer practice, then there is this. And it's like she doesn't go to bed till like 11:30 midnight and has to be up again for school in the morning. I mean, so it was a much more packed schedule than most adults have. And I think that we don't realize that. Sorry, let me just finish this one quick thought. We don't realize that as adults, we actually have a lot more free time than we give students in our schools. If you add in homework and extracurriculars and everything, that was eye-opening because we did this I played this video with like a bunch of 170 odd community members and business leaders and so on. And they all have kids, but they've never really sat down and thought and sort of done sort of the math on how much we are expecting from kids. in terms of just time. And, one of the big things I think is having, when you're young, is having the time to just be, hang out with your friends, learn, just do nothing or play or, explore. We've just chopped that out. And so to me, one of the benefits here is possibly giving some of that breathing space, which I think we have denied our students for a long time. Anyway, Janelle, you were saying something. Sorry.
Yeah, so it's definitely hard to do all the things you're supposed to do. So I'm pretty like future oriented and trying to become well-rounded and things like be the best I can for applications and college. And we wake up at 5 o'clock every morning and we go to the gym, just trying to live a healthy lifestyle. And then straight from there, we go to school and I have like spelling UIL in the morning. And then I have like powerlifting in the morning. And then I have like the musical and just everything. So yeah, I definitely see I don't get home some days till like 10 o'clock. And then homework on top of that because church and everything else. So.
Sorry, no, thank you for sharing that, because I don't think many people realize how much we have regimented the lives of our children. We barely give them any time to breathe. And if this is one way that makes it happen, I think, Chris, sort of pushing back at what you said about more studies about this. I don't think we have studies about like 5 days are great, or whether 3 would be better or 6 would be worse. I think it's very deeply contextual, but I think also we have robbed children of their childhood in many, many ways. And if this is giving a little bit of freedom, I'm open to seeing it, right? Let's try it. So John, go ahead.
Can I share something anecdotally from our experience with this 4-day week? There were folks that were opposed to it. Some of the local businesses were opposed to it when we did it. And we did a survey after the first year, and I don't remember the exact percentages of those that were in favor, but it's 80 and 90% among all populations, teachers, students, and parents after experiencing it. And the anecdotal piece of it is what I have heard from parents is a sense of surprise and delight at just that releasing of the pressure on the students and on the families of trying to make it all happen. Just that extra third day of the weekend has created opportunities for family time, for going to the state park. And I do want to talk about the marginalized family, because I know when I say going to the state park, your mind may go automatically to, oh, well, that's the wealthy families that are going out and camping, things like that. But that's not our population. We do have some wealthy families, but the majority of our kids are low income, and these kids are involved. Just like Janelle's talking about, we had a football game yesterday, and we have 100 kids on our football team. Well, 80% of those kids are free and reduced lunch, but they're showing up on Fridays. They're building relationships with their coaching staff. They're getting, treatment preparation, and then they're getting on a bus and going to a football game. But they're not doing that and missing class time to go do that. They're doing that on a Friday that is no longer a class day. So that sense of delight and that sense of relief of just this intense, high pressure, participatory scheduling that we have our kids under has been the reason, in my opinion. I don't have data to support this, but I think that's a big reason that the response to this has been one of delight, and people are pleased with it largely in our community, including the parents, not just the.
Thank you, John. I just love the fact that you use the word delight in there, which is usually not what we use in these contexts. Kurt, I know you have your audio.
Well, just a point. You might want to be connected to my friends at University of North Texas and see if they can get project going on, to do some research. A lot of students, doctoral students, as part of their classes, they need to conduct research projects. So, I mean, if you have a little blurb you can send me, I can share with them, as well as SMU and other places. So, making those connections and ties are important. And I think there's a huge amount of studies that you can conduct there. Before I ask my question, I think Chris needs to have a reflection on what you all have said.
Well, why don't you ask your question, and then I have a question that takes it in a different direction.
Okay. So I'm just curious whether or not you have formed or become part of any networks of four-year schools, whether it's in the state of Texas or more nationally. Those that might, again, be listening to the show later or watching it later, you know, they might be curious if there are support structures that exist out there, whether it's their teacher support structures, Bethany, or student support structures, or you know, school or school district support structures more likely, John. So does anyone want, is there a chain or network, again, that might be in a minor kind of thing, just, you know, maybe a 1-year event kind of thing, or something a bit more substantive in nature?
I'll let Bethany answer whether there's any teacher groups related specifically to the 4-day week in Texas. I can tell you that I'm not aware of anything formal whatsoever. Informally, you know, on an ad hoc basis, there were a lot of schools that reached out to us after we adopted it. And so I know who these other superintendents are, who these other schools are. I know I can pick up the phone and call them, but no, there's nothing organized that I'm aware of.
Bethany?
And the same with teachers. There's nothing that I'm aware of that any organization for 4 days.
Did you do a lot of reading, Bethany, before you switched over and try and find out what's been said or in the literature?
I've read some of the articles leading up to it, and for the most part, a lot of them for our community were for it. And then I've seen they've done several polls before to see what the community's views were, and the teachers and students, and then the research behind it.
Okay, Chris, you want to jump in?
Sure. So I'm not convinced, but this is not a debating show. So I just want to set the whole thing aside and bring up a point that you started with that I thought was really important. And that is that what set you on this journey was that you were losing teachers, and losing teachers that you wanted to keep because they felt that they could get a better deal in a different district, not necessarily in terms of salary, but in terms of time. And I think that that's a significant issue for sure, because what it highlights is that we don't have as many highly qualified teachers as we need. And we also know that, as you said, it's difficult to attract those teachers to come to high poverty districts. Because the challenges of teaching there are greater than they are with more privileged students. And so if you are running a high poverty district, it's a constant, I would imagine it's a constant struggle, both to find highly qualified teachers to come and then to retain those teachers. And I'd love, setting aside the 4-day week, I'd just love you to talk about that in terms of strategies you use, or whether I'm overemphasizing this as a problem, or just what about this issue?
Yeah, I think it's one of the most important problems that I get paid to solve along with my leadership team, and it has been. I'm in my 8th year now, and so we've tried every thing we. Some of them are a little bit silly. I allow teachers to wear blue jeans every single day of the week. And that sounds like a minor thing. I don't think it is. I'll let Bethany speak to that. But that was one of the first things we did when we got there, was to say, there's nothing magic about slacks, right? So you can wear jeans. I did tell them I didn't want them to wear like Garfield t-shirts from Walmart with their jeans. I would like a collared shirt or something. So we did that. Then the state a few years ago provided large, a bunch of money to school districts and said, a third of this money, I'm paraphrasing, this has been several years ago, so I don't remember the exact details, but a third of this money needs to go to teacher raises. And we gave like 90-something% of it to teacher raises, just to try and keep up with the really fancy communities to our east that are not having as much trouble recruiting and retaining teachers. We've also really emphasized resourcing our teachers. We have a great technology team, great technology availability to our teachers. We've gone to a 1-to-1 student, device ratio. We try to give tons of support. We try to bring in, discipline trainings and things to help, any way we can. If our teachers ask for something, we try to provide that. And then we came back again a couple of years ago and gave another raise, where we had, come across some grant money or something from the state or federal government, whatever. And but we've given 2 significant raises. on to 4-day weeks. We allow genes. We try to resource our teachers. We literally attack that problem from every possible angle, because if I can't, the best thing I can do for my kids is put quality teachers in that classroom who are actively designing effective, engaging lessons, who are loving those kids, who are building the culture, who are creating a home away from home where those kids we want our kids to want to come to school. We want them to want to be there. And we want to give them everything they need. And that only happens if you have great teachers. And I like to think that we have seen an improvement both in the quantity of applicants and in the quality of applicants, not just because of the 4-day week, but because of the holistic approach we've taken to the problem of the teacher shortage in a high poverty.
And I just want to say, I really applaud what you're doing. I think it requires enormous creativity, and I'm really glad that you're recognizing the centrality of strong teachers in making any kind of education work.
John, there's always going to be someone listening to us who's contemplating doing this, right? As I mentioned at the start, talking about idea sculptures earlier. And some of those people might still be a little confused as to what's going on the optional 5th day for the K-4 students and what the costs are for something like that. Can you speak to the staffing that's required to provide that option? Everything costs money, you know, in some ways. Can you talk to that? And I'll go back to Chris and my earlier point. Is there anything that you're doing on Fridays that's of an online nature for the students who might be beyond grade 4 to get them reconnected back for that 5th day? So what is that 5th day like? What's the experience, and how much? Who's covering that? What are you doing?
Yeah, so we're not doing anything online right now. Now that's something in the future we could look at if we felt like, you know, we needed to retrench or do something different because our student performance is lagging or something like that. I want to touch on one other. This is relative to what you just asked, but it's also related to something that was asked earlier about feeding kids. We partner with a local charity called Backpack Buddies. They've always provided foods for our kids who are identified as needing food in their homes. They've always sent backpacks home full of food on Fridays. So at the end of the day on Friday, our kids would take home enough food for Saturday and Sunday. So they had plenty of food on the weekend. When we started not having school on Fridays, we approached that charity and asked them, would you be able to add the Friday to your service for these kids? And they agreed. They only asked for us to help them transport the backpacks to the campuses. So we tasked that to our maintenance department to go pick up the meals and deliver those for this charity, because they're shorthanded like a lot of charities are, right? So we have 300 to 400 kids, about 10% of our population, that are getting meals on Thursday afternoons, and they're taking them home, and it's enough food to feed, you know, that student for the weekend. So as far as the actual optional Friday remediation, the way we set that up is we open up an application window during the summer, and we require the parents who are interested in it. We advertise it online, but we actually ask them to come up to the central office and pick up a paper application, because we want to make sure that these are parents who are going to take some ownership of this program, and actually, you know, make sure their kids come and prioritize it. We do set a policy that if your student misses 2 to 3 of these Fridays, then they don't get to come anymore. So we're trying to flip the script of the education. You know, Monday through Thursday is sort of an entitlement, and we have lots and lots of parents that we really struggle to get them to understand the importance of attendance and to come. So we didn't want to, you know, fight that battle on Fridays. So if you don't come on Fridays, then eventually we just don't let you come. So as far as staffing, the application window allows us to have a good idea during the summer of how many teachers we're going to need. And then we basically put out the word via email to our staff, and we pay it exactly like we pay summer school. Our summer school, we have a certain hourly wage, and we advertise that to staff, and whoever wants to, you know, apply for a summer school position, they apply, and then we go through a process to select the ones who do the work. We do that for the Friday remediation too. We say, you know, we're going to offer this and we're going to pay extra. It does cost us money, We have to pay the nurse. We have an adult to student ratio of about 1 adult for every 10 kids who come up on those optional Fridays. Those aren't all teachers. We have classroom aides that help. It is available to students who are special needs, special education students, including students in our life skills classrooms that may need one-to-one aid, because a lot of times those are the parents who are in the most need of childcare and help. And so we provide for those needs on those Fridays. We actually do not provide transportation on Fridays. We let the parents work that out, and we have a public transit system that they can take advantage of, or they can transport their own children. As far as money that it costs us, I can't prove this, but our uptick in enrollment that we've seen since we went to the 4-day week, and we've been growing ever since we went to the 4-day week in terms of students. So we feel like we're offering something that folks in the communities surrounding our town because not all the towns around us have the 4-day week. So we feel like we're getting some of those students enrolling in our school. That's helping us financially. And then the improved attendance, because like I said earlier, a lot of the appointments that were happening on Wednesdays and Tuesdays are now happening on Fridays, which we're not in school, so we're not losing that attendance. So we feel like the cost of offering the optional Friday remediation program is more than offset by the financial benefits and savings that have come by going to the 4 days.
John, remind us again how long you've been up doing this? How many years?
Last year, first full year. We're in our second year of the 4-day week.
So all three of you, have there been changes to it since you started a year ago, or what changes would you suggest to improve what you've put in place?
I did note this year we did change our accelerated instruction day right a week before the 6 weeks ends, to give those students a chance to change their grade or understand what they need to understand before the 6 weeks ends, which I thought was really beneficial for our students.
Janelle?
I haven't noticed much of a change, but it definitely is helpful because missing school, taking like AP courses and honors courses and missing that work, and then having to like redo that work and make up tests and stuff on top of the homework you're already given is quite difficult. And I have gone on to school on some makeup days because I have missed some school, especially last year. So going to school on that Fridays and just being able to talk to the teachers more on a one-on-one has definitely been very helpful, because I struggle especially with math. Like, that's my hardest subject. And so I'm taking dual credit college algebra this year. So just having that one-on-one teacher, it's very been helpful.
Going back to the way this all started for us, it was almost a crisis response, and we moved toward the 4-day week very, very late in the summer, the first year that we went into it, because we were losing teachers, and the conversation started maybe in April. So by the time we actually, the board approved the move to the 4-day week, it was late summer. And what that meant was the rest of the summer was really spent kind of revamping a lot of our HR processes. There's just a lot, when you switch to the 4-day week, there's a lot of behind the scenes things with payroll and insurance, and just a lot of stuff that you don't really realize you're getting into until you get into it, right? So one of the negative consequences of us not doing this earlier and more slowly and thoughtfully was our PD going into the first year of it was not sufficient for moving to such a major change. We tried to do some PD going into the 4-day week. We also didn't really have anyone in-house who really had been on a 4-day week, right? So any of the training that we provided, a lot of it was just things that we had found, and we were trying to learn, right before we were teaching the teachers. So for the second year, I think we were able to be a lot more thoughtful and have a lot better professional development to prepare our teachers. And one other point I want to make, the first year we went into it, I went onto a campus. It was our second and third grade campus. And I talked to the principal, and we were about 6 or 8 weeks into the school year. And I said, well, tell me, how do your teachers like the 4-day week? And obviously the kind of superficial unofficial answer that I expected was, oh, they love it. Oh, they've got Fridays. They're able to rest. They're able to do things, at home with their family, whatever. And she said, oh, they're extremely stressed. They're super, super stressed. And I said, okay, why? And she said, well, they have to get the same learning in. They have to get the same content in. The STAR test didn't change to a 4-day week STAR test. It's the same STAR test. And so it took that first 12 weeks really for our teachers to feel more comfortable with what they're teaching, the pace they're teaching it at, trimming out some things that they had been doing that maybe weren't the things they should prioritize. So I just think that having done it for a year, we were a lot better at getting our teachers ready and preparing everyone for this year.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking at the time and an hour has gone by, as it always does, too quickly. I think we could go on forever for at least another half an hour, 45 minutes more, but I'm cognizant of your time and grateful for the time that you gave us. So Bethany, just the fact that you're in a classroom on a Saturday speaks to me of the quality of education and teacher that you are. So thank you for all that you do. And Janelle, it's, as I said in the beginning, it's always a pleasure to have students on the show. And, when I hear people like you speak, it gives me hope for the future. So all the very best for everything that you're trying. And John, I mean, this is for all the people who are watching the show later. If you haven't gone and looked at some of John's videos, where I so appreciate the voice that you give to public education, and I think one of the most difficult jobs in education today is the one that you have, which is that of a superintendent, where you're sort of balancing so many different things. We're not even getting into the broader political climate about public education, but finances, structure, teachers, meeting the curricular needs at a time of great economic stress. So, I really think that is one of the hardest jobs that one can have in education today. So thank you for all that you do. And thank you so much, all three of you, for joining us. I think Zao will really enjoy this episode, and he'll be chomping that he didn't get a chance to jump in and ask some questions. So thank you very much. And Kurt, I think you're introducing the next episode.
Yes, I am. And we're going to go back to the topic of AI next week. Episode 166 is AI A to Z. In particular, E, ethics, and a wee bit of P, pedagogy, pedagogy, with my friends Donald Clark from the UK, from Brighton, originally from Scotland, and Brian Alexander from the US. Both futurists, both kind of controversial speakers at times, thoughtful, highly thoughtful people that will be holding a really great conversation about AI. Hope you come next week.